My mother called me on a Tuesday afternoon, crying so hard she could barely get the words out. She said they needed me. She said they didn't know what to do. She said I was their rock, their responsible one, the daughter who always showed up. I let the phone ring out. I want to tell you how I got there, because it didn't happen overnight. It never does. The kind of decision that looks cold from the outside is almost always the result of years of quietly absorbing things that were never okay, telling yourself it was fine, telling yourself family is family, telling yourself that the people who raised you must love you, even when they can't seem to show it. I want to tell you all of it, because I think some of you already know this story. Maybe not the exact details, but the feeling, that bone-deep feeling of being the one who holds everything together while somehow being the one everyone forgets. I think you know that feeling. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I was 27 years old when I first started sending money home, and 29 when I finally understood that what I had been doing wasn't love. It was a subscription service they'd never planned to cancel. I grew up the oldest of 2 daughters in a mid-sized town in Ohio. My sister is 5 years younger than me, and from the time she was born, the dynamic in our house was something I could feel but never quite name. I was the one who got good grades because that was expected. She was the one who got celebrated for passing. I was the one who cooked dinner when my mother was tired. She was the one who sat at the table waiting to be served. I was the one who got a part-time job at 16 to cover my own school supplies and clothes. She got a credit card with my father's name on it at 17. I told myself it wasn't resentment. I told myself I was just more independent by nature. I told myself a lot of things. I left for college on a partial scholarship and 2 part-time jobs. My parents helped with what they could, which wasn't much, and I graduated with some debt, but with a degree in accounting and a job offer in Columbus. I was proud. I was genuinely, deeply proud of what I had built. My first year out of school, I was making decent money for my age, not extraordinary, but steady. My boyfriend, who I had been with since junior year, was living with me in a 1-bedroom apartment and working in logistics. We were careful with money. We meal prepped. We didn't take vacations. We were building something. Then my father called and told me they were struggling. He didn't say it like that exactly. He said the car payment had gotten tight, and my mother's prescription costs had gone up, and it would just be a couple of months, just until things leveled out. He said it the way my father always said things, matter-of-factly, without apology, as if he were reporting the weather. I sent $500 that month, and then the next month, and the month after that. The couple of months stretched into a year. The $500 became $600 when they mentioned the water heater. It became $700 when my mother said she was embarrassed not to contribute to my sister's college fund. I didn't have a college fund. I had loans I was still paying off, but I wired the money. I want to be honest here. No one put a gun to my head. I made the choice every month. I made it because I loved them. I made it because I had been trained since childhood to believe that being useful was the same as being loved, and I didn't yet know the difference. I made it because every time I sent the money, my mother would call and say, "I don't know what we would do without you." And for a few minutes, I felt like I mattered. I kept a spreadsheet, the way accountants do. Not to hold it over anyone, just because tracking numbers is how I think. Over the first 2 years, I sent my parents a little over $15,000. I never told my sister. I never told my boyfriend, not the full amount, because I was ashamed of how much it had grown. I just quietly moved money from one account to another every month, like paying a bill. My sister, during this time, was finishing her degree in communications. She spent a semester abroad. She came home with highlights and a new boyfriend and stories about bars in Barcelona. I watched her Instagram from my apartment and felt something I refused to call jealousy. I called it confusion instead. She graduated, moved back home, and immediately announced she was getting married. My parents were thrilled. My mother cried happy tears on the phone and talked about the wedding for 45 minutes. I listened. I asked questions. I said all the right things. 2 weeks later, my father called and asked if I could increase my monthly transfer to help with wedding expenses. I didn't say yes right away that time. I sat with the phone against my ear and looked out the window at the parking lot of my apartment complex and felt something shift slightly in my chest, like furniture being rearranged. Then I said I could probably manage a little more, and we hung up. $800 a month. The wedding was beautiful from the photos. I was the maid of honor. I paid for my own dress, my own travel, my own hotel room. I gave a speech that made everyone cry. My mother hugged me at the reception and said, "You're so strong, you know that? You've always been our strong one." I smiled. I held my champagne glass. I did not say what I was thinking. What I was thinking was, I am tired. But I kept going, because that's what strong ones do. About 8 months after the wedding, my grandmother on my father's side passed away. She was 83 and had been declining for a while, so it wasn't a shock, but it was still grief, still loss. My father flew home for the services. I sent flowers and a card, and took 2 days off work to drive up and be there, even though it meant pushing a deadline. My grandmother had lived modestly her whole life, but she had owned her house outright, a 3-bedroom in a quiet part of Indiana where she'd raised 4 kids and outlived my grandfather by 20 years. When the estate was settled, my father and his siblings split the proceeds. My father's share was a little over $90,000. He didn't tell me about the inheritance for almost 3 months. I found out the way you find out most things you weren't supposed to know by accident, through a detail that didn't add up. My mother mentioned, casually, in the middle of a phone call about something else entirely, that they had finally sorted out the situation with the house. I asked what she meant. There was a pause, just a half-second too long. She said they had used some of my grandmother's money to put a down payment on a property. I said that was great, that I was glad they finally had some stability. She said yes, and then moved the conversation along. I didn't think much about it immediately. But that night, something kept pulling at me. I opened the county auditor's website for their area, another accounting brain habit, typed in their address, and looked at the property records. The house was not in my parents' names. It was in my sister's. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after that. My boyfriend was in the other room watching TV, and I could hear the low murmur of it through the wall, and I just sat there, very still, looking at the screen. The document was right there. The deed, filed 6 weeks prior. My sister's name, clear as anything. I closed the laptop. I opened it again. I looked at my spreadsheet. 15 months at $800. Before that, 24 months at an average of $600. I added it up, the way I always do. The number sat there on the screen, and I looked at it for a long time. I did not call anyone that night. I went to bed, and I stared at the ceiling, and I let myself feel all of it, the disbelief, the slow-burning recognition, the grief, because it was grief, not just about the money, about what the money meant, about all the Saturday mornings I'd skipped plans with friends to make sure the transfer went through, about the vacation my boyfriend and I had postponed twice, about the way my mother's voice always softened when she said, "We don't know what we'd do without you," and how I had needed that softness so much that I'd given up things I can't get back. I didn't say anything for 2 weeks. I went to work. I answered emails. I had dinner with my boyfriend and laughed at the right moments. I called my mother twice normal calls. Nothing unusual, just checking in. I listened to her talk about my sister's new house, how lovely the neighborhood was, how good it would be for them to have family nearby. She never mentioned that it was my sister's house, specifically. She talked about it as though it belonged to everyone equally, the way she'd always talked about everything, as though the distribution of things was just a natural phenomenon, like weather, not something anyone had decided. The 3rd week, I stopped the transfer. I didn't send an explanation. I didn't make a phone call. I just didn't move the money. 11 days later, my mother texted me, "Hey honey, just checking, did you forget to send this month? Things are a little tight." I looked at the text for a moment. I thought about everything I could have said. I thought about the spreadsheet, the deed, the way she'd said our strong one at the wedding while my sister danced in a dress my parents had helped pay for. I typed back, "You might want to check with the homeowner." I put my phone down and went back to work. The next 3 days were quiet. I almost wondered if that was it, if maybe they'd understood. Then my father called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was short. He said they needed to talk, that there had been a misunderstanding, that I should call him back. His voice was careful, the way it got when he was trying not to be angry. I didn't call back. My mother tried next. Then my sister, which surprised me more than anything. My sister, who had never once asked how I was affording the monthly transfers. My sister, who had thanked me for my wedding speech by saying I had such a way with words, as though the only thing I'd contributed to her wedding was 2 minutes of sentences. She texted, "Mom and Dad are really stressed. Can you just call them?" I read it. I set the phone face down. I want to tell you what I was feeling during those days, because I think it matters. People assume that going quiet like that, withdrawing, must feel powerful. Like revenge, has a clean, satisfying shape to it. It doesn't, not really. What it felt like was more like finally putting down something very heavy that I'd been carrying for so long. I'd forgotten it wasn't part of my body. There was relief. There was also a sadness that I wasn't prepared for, a mourning for the version of my family I'd always hoped they'd become, the one where my value wasn't measured in direct deposits. I called my grandmother's name in my head a few times that week. She was the one who used to cup my face in her hands when I was small and tell me I was going to be something. Not useful, not strong, something. I wished she could have seen me in that moment, not because I thought she'd be proud of the fight, but because I think she would have understood the exhaustion. My boyfriend knew something was happening. He didn't push. He made coffee and left it on my desk in the morning and rubbed my shoulders without asking for anything, and I remembered, not for the first time, why I had chosen to build my life with him, instead of shrinking myself to fit into someone else's. About 2.5 weeks after I'd stopped the transfer, my parents showed up, not a call ahead, just a knock at my door on a Saturday morning, my mother's face already crumpled before I'd even fully opened it. My father stood slightly behind her, his jaw set, looking at a spot above my shoulder. I let them in. I made coffee, because that's how I was raised, and we sat at my kitchen table, and my mother cried and said they didn't understand why I was doing this, that family doesn't turn their back on family, that after everything they had done for me. My father said that the property situation was complicated, that it was a tax thing, that my sister's name was on it for legal reasons. He said it with the absolute confidence of a man who has never once expected to be questioned. I let him finish. Then I slid my laptop across the table and showed them the spreadsheet. Every month, every transfer, the total at the bottom. My father looked at it. My mother stopped crying and looked at it. The number was sitting there between us like a third person at the table. I said, "I have loved you my whole life. I have shown up every time. I have never asked for recognition, or repayment, or even a thank you that felt like it meant something. But I looked up the deed. I know whose name is on it, and I need you to understand that I am not your emergency fund. I am your daughter." Nobody said anything for a moment. My mother said that wasn't fair, that I knew she loved me, that the house was just a practical decision. I said I understood. I said I really did understand. And then I said that going forward, all practical decisions about money would stay on my side of the table. My father said I was being dramatic. I said I hoped they had a safe drive home. They left 20 minutes later. My mother hugged me at the door in a way that felt like a question. I hugged her back because she was still my mother, because I had not stopped loving her, because being done with a dynamic is not the same as being done with a person. But I didn't change my mind. The months that followed were the strangest of my life in some ways. My relationship with my parents went quiet in a way it never had before. There were phone calls, but shorter ones. There were holidays where we were polite in the way that people are polite when they are still deciding whether to say the true thing or keep the peace. My sister called me once, about 2 months later, and said she felt caught in the middle. I told her I was sorry she felt that way. I asked her if she'd known about the deed when it was filed. There was a silence. She said it wasn't that simple. I said I knew it wasn't. We didn't talk again for a while after that. I took the money I'd been sending home and started putting it into savings. It accumulated faster than I expected, which sounds obvious, but seeing it actually grow in the account felt like something I hadn't experienced in years. My boyfriend and I finally took the trip we'd been postponing a week on the coast of Maine. Cold and gray and perfect. I stood at the edge of the water on the second day and felt something unknot in my chest that I hadn't even realized was knotted. He asked me what I was thinking. I said I was thinking about how strange it is to discover, in your late 20s, that you're allowed to have things, not just to provide them. He took my hand, and we stood there for a while, without talking, which is one of the best things about the right person. They know when the silence is the conversation. About 6 months later, I got a call from my father. Not distressed, not asking for anything, just calling. He said he'd been thinking, and that he wanted me to know that he knew I had done a lot for them over the years, and that he hadn't always said so. He said it quickly, the way my father says anything vulnerable, like he's trying to get it out before he can reconsider it. I told him I heard him. I told him I loved him. I told him I was glad he called. It wasn't a movie moment. No music, no tearful revelation, no guarantee that things would be fundamentally different going forward. It was just my father, trying to say something true, and me deciding to receive it. We talked for another 10 minutes about ordinary things. His garden, my work, a storm that had knocked out their power for 2 days. At the end of the call, before he hung up, he said, "You turned out good, you know that?" I said, "I know, Dad." It's a strange thing, finally knowing the difference between being valued and being useful. Useful is easy to confuse for valued, because it looks similar from the outside. People need you. People call you. People talk about how reliable you are. But useful has a ceiling. The moment you stop being useful, the phone stops ringing in the same way, and then you understand what was actually there. Being valued doesn't stop when you say no. It doesn't evaporate when you draw a line. It sits quietly in the room with you, even when you're inconvenient, even when you're unavailable, even when you cost something. I spent so many years making sure I never cost anything. I absorbed everything and transferred it into deposits and labor and time, and kept my own needs small. Kept them in a corner where they wouldn't bother anyone. I told myself that was what good daughters did. That was what strong people did. That was love. I understand now that what I was doing was confusing love with proof. I kept paying because some part of me believed that if I stopped, the evidence would disappear, the evidence that I belonged to them, that I mattered, that I was not as invisible as I sometimes feared. The evidence was never going to be in a bank transfer. I know that now. My boyfriend proposed 8 months after Maine. He did it quietly, at home, over takeout, with a ring he'd picked carefully for months. I said yes before he finished the sentence. We are getting married next spring. I am planning a wedding that is ours, sized for what we can afford, designed around what actually matters to us, not around what will look a certain way to certain people. My parents are invited. My sister is invited. I do not know exactly what those relationships will look like in 5 years, in 10. Families are long stories, and we're still in the middle of them. But I know who I am in this one now, and that's not something anyone can deed away. The last time I talked to my mother, she said something that stayed with me. She said she was proud of how I had put my foot down. She said it like I had done something surprising, something new. Like the version of me that held the line was a different person from the one who had sent money home for years. I wanted to tell her they were the same person. The same person who had loved them, quietly and practically, for most of her adult life. The same person who had finally understood that love is not a mortgage you don't keep paying on a property you no longer own a stake in. But I just said thank you. Some things you keep for yourself. Someone once told me that the hardest part of setting a boundary is accepting that the other person might not respect it and choosing to hold it anyway. That you can love someone completely and still refuse to be diminished by them. That the two things are not in conflict. That it is possible, even necessary, to say I love you, and I'm done with this in the same breath, and mean both fully. I believe that now, in a way I didn't know how to before. If you are the one in your family who always shows up, who always sends the money, who always makes the drive, and gives the speech, and smooths things over, I want you to hear this. Your reliability is not the same as your worth. You are not worth more because you are useful. You are worth everything because you exist. And if the people around you have never learned to tell the difference, that is their limitation, not your defining feature. You are allowed to put the weight down. You don't have to carry it to prove that you can.